This episode is brought to you by Jack Daniels. Jack Daniels and music are made for each other. They share a rhythm in the craft of making something timeless, while being a part of legendary nights. From backyard jams to sold-out arenas, there's a song in every toast. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Jack Daniels and Old No. 7 are registered trademarks. Tennessee whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume. Jack Daniel Distillery, Lynchburg, Tennessee.
At New Balance, we believe if you run, you're a runner. However you choose to do it. Because when you're not worried about doing things the right way, you're free to discover your way. And that's what running is all about. Run your way at newbalance.com/running.
Can we talk about the Oval Office? If you close your eyes, I bet you can picture it. The fireplace, the portraits, and ever since Donald Trump has been back in office, the gold. Before we really get into it, it's worth talking about what this room has looked like historically. If you Google around, you'll see. Joe Biden kept a moon rock in there. Also a bust of Martin Luther King Jr., one of Cesar Chavez, too. And all that stuff has been moved. Even the moon rock. How did you notice the changes?
Because of how shiny they were.
Abdullah Fayyad has been following all this over at Vox.
He's redecorating the Oval Office in a way that looks a lot like Trump's properties. It seems like every time there's a new meeting, there's more gold in the background.
To be straight, every president gives the White House a little makeover. But what Trump has done seems different. It's not just the way every surface has been gilded, though that is notable. The Washington Post reported that the president ditched a Swedish ivy plant that had been sitting in the Oval Office for decades. An official portrait of Barack Obama got stuck in a stairwell. And then there's the merch that's available. Some visitors to the Oval Office have exited through a gift shop of a sort, where you can get, you guessed it, a red MAGA hat. All this together, Abdullah says, well, it's anathema to how the White House usually runs.
As grand a building as it is, it's also relatively understated. You know, a lot of times when tourists go to Washington, D.C., be they Americans or especially foreigners, they're often surprised by how small the White House looks. There's always been a very intentional effort to not project yourself as a king when you're president. And one of the ways to do that is to not have these kinds of ostentatious displays of wealth that we're mostly used to seeing in royal palaces, not in presidential homes, certainly not in the presidential home in the United States.
If I had to take away one thing from the Oval Office aesthetic, I think it would be it's Trump's world and we're all just living in it.
Yes, that's exactly it. Everything that he does really does center around himself. He views himself as, you know, the most important aspect of American government, and not just because he's the president, but because he's Donald Trump.
Today on the show, how the Trump aesthetic in the Oval Office and beyond is changing U.S. government from the inside out. I'm Mary Harris. You're listening to What Next? Stick around.
Wouldn't it be great to manage your portfolio on one platform? Well, now you can trade all in one place on Robinhood. That means you can trade individual stocks and ETFs, and also buy and sell crypto using seriously powerful and intuitive tools at one of the lowest costs on average without needing to manage multiple apps. Robinhood makes withdrawing and depositing crypto seamless. Send crypto to your Robinhood account or send crypto from your Robinhood account to other wallets without deposit or withdrawal fees from Robinhood. Trade all in one place. Get started now on Robinhood. Trading crypto involves significant risk. Crypto trading is offered through an account with Robinhood Crypto LLC. Robinhood Crypto is licensed to engage in virtual currency business activity by the New York State Department of Financial Services. Crypto held through Robinhood Crypto is not FDIC insured or SIPC protected. Network fees may apply to crypto transfers. Crypto transfers may not be available to all customers. Investing involves risk, including loss of principal. Securities trading is offered through an account with Robinhood. Financial LLC, member SIPC, a registered broker-dealer.
This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. With the weather getting cooler, if you're like me, you're looking around for a couple of new items for your wardrobe, like a new sweater, some cute new kicks. And Saks Fifth Avenue makes it easy to get creative with your personal style and find the best arrivals for fall. I went over to Saks.com to check out what they've got on tap, and I gotta say, what I love about clicking around their website is that every piece looks special, one of a kind, as if you'd walk into the office or a party and instantly grab everyone's attention. All the big brands are there, stuff like Alice and Olivia, you know, the young and trendy stuff. I love that I can see the care in every piece Saks has chosen for their fall collections. Each dress or pant or shoe feels a little bit elevated. So if you want shopping to be fun and easy, head over to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day. By now, you know, President Trump has some pretty firm ideas about how the world should look. The Washington Post has summed up his aesthetic as a combination of classical architecture and cartoonish virility inside a WWE alternative reality. You can see these stylistic preferences at work all over Washington these days, and not just at the White House. The president has signed one executive order after another, aiming to make classical architecture the rule for federal buildings. He calls it making federal architecture beautiful again. However you feel about all this, you can at least credit Trump with consistency. Look back at pictures of Trump's penthouse in New York, and you'll see the same kind of gold trim he's installing in the White House today.
I mean, I think to understand Trump's entire aesthetic, you kind of have to look at the lifestyles of the rich and famous in New York City in the 1980s. And, you know, that time and place specifically really shaped Donald Trump's ideas about what it means to be successful in America, what it means to look successful in America. And, you know, we see that impact in how he talks about a lot of things today and what he values today. He values, of course, still real estate. He values television ratings. He values Time magazine covers and is obsessed with Time's Person of the Year issue. And these, in the 1980s, were all markers of clout. And more than that, you know, that era of American prosperity at the top, you know, was kind of defined by greed and by ostentatious displays of wealth. That was when we saw American CEOs and the rich kind of get more and more out of touch with the rest of America. When CEO pay started to exponentially grow compared to worker pay. And there wasn't so much issue taken with, you know, the rich showing off their riches, at least among themselves. And they kind of, you know, relished their fame and wealth and success and flaunted it.
Trump frames his ostentatious displays of wealth as almost a public service. He says seeing his lavish lifestyle might be aspirational for people. But Abdullah sees it a little differently.
When the White House starts to look more like his private residences, when Air Force One's design starts to look suspiciously similar to his own private jet, when the Rose Garden is paved over and has yellow umbrellas that looks a little bit like Mar-a-Lago, what we're seeing is a president that is, what he's ultimately really trying to do is to so deeply intertwine his own personal image with the government of the United States so that the two can't be separated from one another. We're seeing banners of Trump, these flags of his portrait, these banners drop down from the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Labor in Washington, D.C. That's a very authoritarian thing to do. He is intertwining his own image with the state. And when you do that, you're essentially saying that you are the state.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're talking about the Department of Labor and this giant banner that came down. Like on one side, it's Trump. On the other side, I believe it's Roosevelt. And they're talking about, American workers. But in recent days, there have been these images circulating on the internet of what it looks like from inside the Department of Labor building itself, which is so eerie because you're like literally looking out through Trump's eyes. And it's this double thing where you're looking out through Trump's eyes. He's also gazing in at you. It's just it's a strange feeling to look at that photo and see, the Trumpness kind of literally covering the building.
Oh, I saw that image you're talking about, and I think it's a very haunting image. I mean, it's haunting. It's also, so in your face that it's almost funny. It's kind of like it would be funny if it wasn't so sad and alarming, because it's such a caricature. And again, this goes back to how much of a caricature Donald Trump himself is. That image of his eyes peering in to the offices, it's very Big Brother is watching you. I mean, it's a caricature of 1984. And that, I think, is such a defining characteristic of Trump, is that when he goes for something and he almost has no self-awareness, he really wants to hammer in the kind of person he's trying to convey that he is. He really wants to hammer in this image that he is projecting, and he just can't let things go.
One of the things that Trump seems almost obsessed with aesthetically, because he's played with it in his first term and now his second term, is making government buildings look a certain way. Mm-hmm. Like there have been these executive orders about architecture. How should a government building look? And it's striking to me because, the Washington Post has an art and architecture critic who's basically noting that when you're controlling how the government buildings look, there are more and less democratic ways to build a building. And part of what these executive orders wanted to do was limit the use of modernist idioms that made transparency the central virtue of design, which seems quite democratic. And it's like you can see how these things are locking together, the aesthetics and the policy.
Yeah, I think his executive orders in both terms on bringing back neoclassical architecture in federal buildings tells us a lot about how Trump thinks about how you should project government. In a lot of ways, Trump is not unique in this. There has been a lot of nostalgia, especially on the right, for these grand neoclassical buildings that the country embraced upon its founding, in building its cities, and especially in building its capital, Washington, D.C., where over the years, we saw America adopt ancient Roman and Greek and even Egyptian, styles of architecture that were mimicking ancient empires. What America wanted to project onto the world is that it is the new empire. Part of the plans for the Lincoln Memorial included a pyramid. We have an obelisk on the National Mall. We have, Greek and Roman columns all over federal buildings in Washington, D.C. But the reason I think that it's interesting is for all the reasons that you just mentioned now, how, new architectural styles were supposed to embrace transparency, were supposed to embrace democracy. There was a lot of innovation, especially in the 60s and 70s and 80s, around how we should design public spaces. And the American government embraced it. That's why we see a lot of brutalism, in Washington, D.C., and a lot of federal buildings that were built in that era, because America not only embraced it as a model of showing and investing in designs that, embraced transparency or embraced openness and democracy, but they also wanted to be a pioneer. The country wanted to look more modern, to embrace this new era and be a pioneer in it. And what Trump is doing in these executive orders is essentially saying, we just want to go back. We don't want to embrace the modern world. And I think that's such a fascinating window into his overall political project, which is to look back and not to embrace modernity.
Well, and you can see it too in, for instance, like the Department of Homeland Security sharing old paintings on social media, including ones like John Gast's American Progress. And these are paintings that really embrace America as a place of manifest destiny, taking. That empire idea is part of what's at the root of a painting like that.
Exactly. And I think that's the part of Trump's aesthetic that I think really concerns me. And part of the reason I was interested in writing about this in the first place is that we're not just seeing Trump remodel the Oval Office. What really concerns me is how his aesthetic, his views on the culture, his fixation on projecting a kind of hypermasculinity permeate his entire administration. And we're seeing, this kind of nostalgia for this kind of 1950s America and early founding America that obviously was extremely exclusionary. We're seeing that nostalgia in the White House across the board. And as you mentioned, it's the Department of Homeland Security. When you look at their social media channel, we're seeing them share, famous, kitsch, what were considered kitsch paintings like Thomas Kincaid's Morning Pledge, which is just depicting American school children pledging allegiance to the flag in a very idyllic, quiet suburb. And those paintings are, shared with the captions like, quote unquote, protect the homeland or remember your homeland's heritage. And we're even seeing, the Department of Homeland Security promote that kind of language in recruiting people to go work there.
And that's like straight up recalling Nazis. Like, let's be clear.
Exactly. And that's why that's the part that really concerns me the most. I mean, when you have the Department of Homeland Security trying to recruit young people by saying, defend your culture, ! I mean, what are they really trying to say? Who are they defending their culture from? And that, redefining of American identity, of what it means to be American, what it means to support your government even, I think that's the really concerning aspect of a lot of the aesthetics that we're seeing in the Trump White House.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Comcast is committed to bringing access to the internet to all Americans, including rural communities across the country, like Sussex County, Delaware.
We were being left behind. Everybody around us seemed to have internet, but we did not. High-speed internet is one of those good things that we needed to help us move our farming, our small businesses, our recreation forward.
Learn more about how we're bringing our next-generation network to more people across the country at ComcastCorporation.com/investment in America.
She's made up her mind to live pretty smart. Learn to budget responsibly right from the start. She spends a little less and puts more into savings. Keeps her blood pressure low and credit score raises. She's cutting debt right out of her life. She tracks her cash flow on a spreadsheet at night.
Boring money moves make kind of lame songs, but they sound pretty sweet to your wallet. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865.
¿Hablas español?
Sprichst du Deutsch?
Kan du norsk?
If you used Babbel, you would. Babbel's conversation-based techniques teaches you useful words and phrases to get you speaking quickly about the things you actually talk about in the real world, with lessons handcrafted by over 200 language experts and voiced by real native speakers. Babbel is like having a private tutor in your pocket. Start speaking with Babbel today. Get up to 55% off your Babbel subscription right now at babbel.com/Spotify, spelled BABBEL.com/Spotify. Rules and restrictions may apply.
You've argued that one of Trump's projects in his aesthetic reimagining is to rebrand the United States in his own image. He'd argue his own image is success. But I think it might be useful to just go back in time and look at an example of when Donald Trump has done this before to see what lessons it offers. Like, I know you've brought this up a few times in your writing, and others have too. But in the late 1980s, early 1990s, Donald Trump owned the Plaza Hotel in New York City. And like the presidency, this was something he saw as a great he paid a lot of money for it, and he saw it as something highly desirable. You know, he almost saw the plaza like a painting, is I think how he's described it. Like, I just wanted to have it because it was beautiful. But then what happened afterwards is kind of interesting, like how it all fell apart, because I think it offers lessons for this moment, too. How would you tell that story?
I think the Plaza Hotel episode in Trump's career is really a good way to understand how Trump operates and how he projects himself personally, because he did buy it for a lot of money, like you said, almost $400 million at the time. And it ended up a massive failure. And he filed for bankruptcy just a few years after he bought it. So he lost money, on the plaza in a very public fashion. It was and should have been very embarrassing. But for Trump, like you said, the plaza wasn't really about making money. It was about having his presence be in what he viewed as a landmark, maybe not even of just New York City, but of the United States. But again, it all fell apart. And I think that shows how what Trump has always really been interested in is just having a shiny veneer, a polished veneer. And what is on the inside doesn't really matter. If it crumbles, if it ends in spectacular failure, it doesn't really matter, because he got the chance to be associated with this grand, iconic thing.
One of the more interesting stories I was reading about the plaza was, Trump takes over the hotel. He has his then wife kind of redo things and make them look nice. And then when it becomes clear he's going to need to be bought out in some way, there's going to need to be some kind of selling, he brings in people to look at the hotel and, potentially invest. And one of the people he brought in, an Asian investor, and their family, they got stuck in one of the rooms, like could not get out because the door jammed. And to me, it was such a good example of, so much attention has been paid to this gem of a place, but not to the really basic things that need to be done to keep it operating in a useful way. And of course, that investor did not invest in the hotel after all this.
I mean, his vision for America is just as remarkably shallow. I think it doesn't matter, and has never really mattered to Trump, how functional America's institutions are. It clearly doesn't matter to him, because he's trying to dismantle those institutions. It doesn't even matter to him how functional the economy is. He just pays attention to what it might look like on the outside. He is obsessed, for example, with just the stock market. If the stock market is doing well, then the economy must be doing well. It doesn't matter what people's wages are. It doesn't matter if unemployment is rising. None of that matters, because stocks are high. America looks like it's booming. It looks prosperous.
You've said that Donald Trump is trying to remake the country in his own image. But Donald Trump is also 79 years old. How do you think this effort is going to play out, given that the person behind it can't live forever?
So a lot of what he's doing can be easily undone. It is easy to, undo his Oval Office, makeover, take out the gold, take out the frames, take out whatever he's been doing to make it look more like it used to. Those things are easy, but his ambitions are also growing in his footprint on the government. I mean, he's planning to build a $200 million ballroom extension to the East Wing, fundamentally changing what the White House looks like. He's trying to inject himself and his image permanently in the White House and American government. And I think, yes, he's 79 years old. Yes, this is his second term, and he's going to be on his way out soon. But the concerning part of his whole aesthetic, his redesign of the White House, what I called his rebranding of America, goes beyond these little touches. The concerning element on this is how he's trying to reshape American culture.
But to do that, he needs all of us to accept that.
And that's exactly it. It's the Department of Homeland Security recruiting people to, quote unquote, defend their culture. It's this promotion of a whiter America, this rejection, essentially, of the America that elected Barack Obama, the multiracial and cross-class coalition that elected Obama, to kind of, imply that America never really existed, or at least never should have existed. And that we're defending America from that America. That's the America that Donald Trump feels comfortable associating with. And that's the cultural change, whether it's through, race baiting, whether it's through the culture wars around gender, whether it's his Kennedy Center takeover and the kind of arts he thinks Americans should enjoy. Those are all attempts to fundamentally change the fabric of American society, but to also fundamentally change the very ideals of what it means to be an American. I'm not saying he's going to be successful at doing that. I think American identity is a deeply embedded part of our culture, and it's hard to undo in one or even two administrations. But that is the fight that he's taking on. Once you redefine Americanness and American citizenship, you redefine American democracy, then you can associate it with one individual. It is not larger than any one person anymore. It just becomes Donald Trump, and that's his ultimate goal.
Abdullah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. This was really enjoyed our conversation.
Abdullah Fayyad is a policy correspondent over at Vox. And that's our show. What Next is produced by Paige Osburn, Elena Schwartz, Rob Gunther, Anna Phillips, and Madeline Ducharme. Mia Lobel is the head of audio here at Slate. Ben Richmond is the senior director of podcast operations. And I'm Mary Harris. Find me on Blue Sky. I'm at Mary Harris. Thanks for listening. Catch you back here next time. This episode is brought to you by Saks Fifth Avenue. With the weather getting cooler, if you're like me, you're looking around for a couple of new items for your wardrobe, like a new sweater, some cute new kicks. And Saks Fifth Avenue makes it easy to get creative with your personal style and find the best arrivals for fall. I went over to Saks.com to check out what they've got on tap, and I gotta say, what I love about clicking around their website is that every piece looks special, one of a kind. As if you'd walk into the office or a party and instantly grab everyone's attention. All the big brands are there, stuff like Alice and Olivia, the young and trendy stuff. I love that I can see the care in every piece Saks has chosen for their fall collections. Each dress or pant or shoe feels a little bit elevated. So if you want shopping to be fun and easy, head over to Saks Fifth Avenue for inspiring ways to elevate your personal style every day.